We can get the recording going, and I'm gonna just give you a quick intro, and then you will be able to just go.
Okay.
Let's see. Aaron, are we recording?
We are.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. We have a special guest today. Mary Hanna is coming to us from the University of Ottawa, where she is trauma director. Mary is well known to a lot of us here at WashU as she was our trauma anesthesia fellow back in 2021, 2020, 2021, right at the start of the pandemic. So she got to experience St. Louis in all its glory. And yeah, she has been doing great things up in Ottawa. And she is here to talk to us today about mass casualty. And with that, Mary, thank you so much. It's great to see you. And thank you for joining us and being willing to share your expertise that we helped give you. So, floor is all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me. And everybody can hear me okay? I'm not blocking the mic or anything. Okay, perfect. So before I get started, I want to acknowledge the diversity of experience in the chat today. So I know some people here are from departments of all sizes. Some may come from very large academic centers where resources aren't limited, and maybe some of you are from smaller centers where resources are limited. And some of you may have gone through Code Oranges maybe multiple times, while for the others, this may be a brand new experience. For whoever you are, there's value here. And my goal is to share a framework and some guiding principles. But I also want to learn from you. So if any of you have gone through and experienced a real Code Orange, please feel free to share your insights because I'm sure your experience will also enrich the other people in the room. So before we dive into a simulation exercise that we'll do for the second part of the presentation, I'll start by going over some core principles of a Code Orange. And then after a simulation exercise, I'll hopefully explain a stepwise approach on how to design a Code Orange plan specifically for your departments. So before we dive into a simulation, I'd like to discuss the principles of a Code Orange, mainly what is a Code Orange, what is our role as anesthesiologists, what is the goal of preparedness, and then we'll talk about 5 key principles that every department should focus on. So communication, resources, staffing, simulation, and wellness. So what is a Code Orange? So Code Orange is a situation or a mass casualty incident where your hospital must expand its capacities to care for sudden influx of critically ill or injured patients. Basically, it's any situation where this rush of patients overwhelms the hospital's normal operating capacity. And that can mean different things for different hospitals. For example, for a 50-bed small hospital, 10 patients can be enough to overwhelm the hospital. For a 700 bed hospital, that can mean 50 or 100 patients. So the key is that the surge overwhelms the normal operating capacity. And another important point of a Code Orange is not just about more patients, but it also introduces operational complexities. Elective cases might have to be canceled, staff roles might have to be reassigned to different areas of the operating room in the hospital, and some spaces within the department may have to be reassigned to different types of care, like surge ICUs. So during a Code Orange, we as anesthesiologists, our role expands beyond just the operating room. We may get called into the emergency department, the PACU, the ICU, and even triage areas. We all know that we bring a unique set of skills. We're excellent at advanced airway management, rapid IV access, crisis management, resuscitation, hemodynamic support, pain control, and critical care. And we know that these all become central during large-scale emergencies. Our department must also be ready to provide, not only to be ready to provide clinical expertise, we might also have to expand to surge demands. We may need to reallocate our staff to other areas of the hospital. We're often the bridge between different specialties, such as the emergency department the surgical team, the trauma team, and the intensive care unit. From start to finish, as anesthesiologists, our role is definitely valuable at every step of the way. So the goal of preparedness isn't about perfection, but it's about being ready. And a disaster, there's always going to be some unpredictability, and no plan is going to survive exactly as it is written. But the goal of being ready is about having structures, habits, and systems that will allow us to adapt quickly and effectively. So for anesthesia, being prepared means that we can act as a force multiplier for the hospital. So that means using our skills and our resources to help care for patients, but not just in the OR, but also in the PACU and in the ICU. So how can we prepare as an anesthesia department? And I like to think of it as 5 key principles: communication and command structure, resources at the ready, staffing and search planning, simulation and drills, and wellness and sustainability. So I'll talk you through each one of these. Number 1, communication and command structure. During a code orange, it's important to establish clear communication rules. Who's going to lead the anesthesia response? Who's going to coordinate with the hospital chain of command? Who's going to communicate with the emergency department or the ICU? How are your staff being notified and deployed? These rules can't be defined in the moment. They should be defined beforehand, rehearsed, and known by everyone. Number 2, resource readiness. So during a code orange, we can't be wasting time hunting for equipment, wondering what's available and if it's working. We need to know right away where our anesthesia machines, transport ventilators, airway carts, IV kits, emergency drugs are located, and if they're stocked and functional. And it's not just about equipment, though. It's also about space. We should identify beforehand whether PACU, block rooms, or even unused ORs can be rapidly converted into critical overflow areas. If these questions are answered beforehand, then we can move fast when the call comes. Number 3, staffing and surge planning. In a code orange, our staffing model has to change instantly. We may have to cancel elective ORs, and that might free up some anesthesiologists, CRNAs, residents, fellows, and assistants. But the key is that their roles can't be improvised on the spot. We need predefined staffing models. Who's going to stay in the OR to cover the emergencies? Who are we going to send into the emergency department for trauma airways? If our PACUs are being converted into overflow areas, where are we going to find people to staff those? Do all members understand their roles? Clarity avoids hesitation. And the 4th principle is simulation and drills. A plan only works if it's rehearsed. If the first time you're running your code orange is during the real event, then you're already behind. Every department should practice their code orange response at a defined rate. For example, once a year. Are you part of your hospital's planning for code orange? If not, find out where these committees are and join the discussion. Be part of tabletop exercises. They're usually multidisciplinary and excellent ways to put your code orange plan to the test and see whether there are deficiencies. Sometimes you're not able to see these deficiencies on paper. We play a vital role in these responses, and you'd be very surprised how many times anesthesia gets overlooked in these critical discussions. Simulation gives your team confidence so that when the real event comes, hopefully it doesn't feel like the first time, but the next time. And then finally, wellness and sustainability. Some of these events can last hours and even days. Having a plan for shift relief, food, and psychological support is essential. Okay, so section number 2. So now that we've gone through some principles of a code orange, I'd like to walk you guys through a mock code orange scenario, and I want you guys to be part of it. So what I want you to do is pull out your phones and join slido.com, either by scanning the QR code or inputting the code. This is not a test of knowledge. but it's going to help you appreciate the pace, the uncertainty, and the pressure of a real disaster. Now, I don't want you to answer of what you would do, but not what you would do in an ideal scenario, but what you would do today, right now. If this was your center and you were being called, what resources do you have and what's available to you right now to be able to run a code orange? So if a lot of you are already in the have joined the Slido, I'll start with the accident. So there's phase one, the collision, initial event. So at 8:42 this morning, a multi-vehicle collision occurs during dense fog on the highway. Highway 417 is one of our major highways. And the vehicles involved include a bus, a school bus with 12 children on board, a passenger van carrying 8 adults. What's the code again?
Dispatch to all units on.
Here it is. 3724497. I maybe should give you guys a few more. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Julie. Okay, I'll keep going. So we have a school bus carrying 12 children. We have a passenger van carrying 8 adults. We have a semi-tanker truck transporting industrial chemicals and multiple civilian cars. EMS has declared a mass casualty incident. Local hospitals are placed on alert. You are the on-call anesthesiologist at a level 2 or 1 trauma center 20 minutes away.
Dispatch to all units on scene. Initial patient extraction complete. 10 critical, 6 walking wounded, 1 confirmed DOA. Be advised, fire crews report a potential unknown chemical spill. Initial casualties en route to your hospital now. ETA approximately 12 minutes.
Okay, so if this were to come to your hospital right now, how prepared would your hospital be for this mass casualty incident? Very prepared, mostly prepared, prepared for some events, but not others, mostly unprepared or unprepared. So I'll give you guys a few. Mostly prepared. Okay, that's good. Okay, so most people say that they would be mostly prepared.
Does it say no active polls for anyone else?
No active polls. I tried it today and it should be working, but
Yeah, it worked.
I can't see a poll right now.
Like it's clearly working for some people.
Okay. Could it be that the code is not here? I'll put it up again. And I'll try it as well.
Like in the upper left, it has information about your presentation. Like it says mockcodeorange.ppt and the date and everything. I don't know. Maybe I'll log out of it and back into it.
Dispatch
Sorry.
to all units.
Okay, it's working for me.
It just disappeared for a moment, but now it's back and it kept the log. So I don't know if it's worth trying to load up the QR code again, Kat, or anyone else that may be having trouble.
All right, so I'm glad to see that most of you are prepared, and that's great. But even the most prepared departments feel or can benefit from revisiting protocols regularly. And if we are partly prepared or prepared for some events but not others, I hope that we can go over some points here that will help you become even more prepared. So we'll go on to the next question. So at your institution, we have a protocol for Code Orange. I know where to find it and how to use it. We have a protocol. I know where it is, but I don't know how to use it. We have a protocol for Code Orange. I don't know where it is or how to use it. And we don't have a protocol for Code Orange. So even within a department where code oranges and traumas are very, very common, it's good that it would be better that everybody in the department knows where the code orange file is and how to find it, so that people aren't hunting for binders and PDFs when people are arriving. So always benefits to revisit where these files are and how to find it, and make sure it's disseminated to the department. So as a Department of Anesthesia, we've done a hazard vulnerability analysis. Yes, we've done that, and we know what kind of disasters we're prone to. Yes, I have heard of that, and our department has done that, but we're not sure of the results, and I've never heard of a hazard vulnerability analysis. So if there are some people who aren't aware of what a hazard vulnerability analysis, that's great, because hopefully we'll be able to talk about that today in the presentation. And if some people have done the hazard vulnerability analysis, but people in the department aren't aware of the results, it's also a great way to disseminate that so that other people are aware of what kind of work has already been done within the department. So let's get to the next, to phase 2. First wave of casualties are arriving. At 9:10, the first ambulance arrived. Sorry. The emergency department is flooded with patients. GCS 5, a blunt trauma patient needing airway intervention, multiple open fractures and crush injuries, 2 children with potential head injuries, and 1 pregnant trauma patient. 5 out of the 7 ORs are mid-surgery with elective procedures. PACU is at half capacity. You must triage surgical cases and prepare for overflow.
Things are getting hectic. ED is overrun, and triage patients are piling up. There are several patients down there that require emergent airway management. Multiple patients will require urgent surgery. Surgery in ORs 2 and 4 are underway, but are past the point of abandoning the procedure. It will be at least an hour before we can get those rooms ready for surgery. PACU is already at 50% capacity. We need to start preparing for overflow.
So, question, how is triage usually structured during a mass casualty incident at your facility? Is it emergency-led using the START or SALT protocol, multidisciplinary with anesthesia input, done ad hoc depending on who is present? We've never done an MCI triage drill, or unsure.
I also would comment, in a lot of cities that have 2-level 1 trauma centers, like St. Louis, a lot of times EMS is taught to split them up or try to bring some to one and some to the other. I don't know what St. Louis's setup is between Barnes and SLU, so if anyone knows that, I would love to hear.
So the variation is important, and triage works best when it's standardized and led by a designated team, and also when everybody knows what the approach is. So even for us as anesthesiologists, if we're not the ones leading it, just knowing the framework helps us understand where patients are going and why, and how they're being prioritized. And if drills haven't been done, sorry, let me just put the do not disturb. I apologize. If drills haven't been done, then that's a gap that we can potentially turn into an opportunity. And rehearsing triages builds confidence, builds comfort within the system, so that we're not forced to do it for the first time under pressure. In your department, who leads clinical decision-making during a disaster response? Is it automatically the chief of your department, whoever's on call? Do you have pre-assigned trauma leaders? There's no clear leadership structure, or you're unsure? So I know from my experience, just having been a fellow at Barnes, that there is a pre-assigned trauma leader, and there is a dedicated subgroup of anesthesiologists who are specifically trained for anesthesia for traumas. but that's not the case in all hospitals. And sometimes it's defaulted to the person on call, which is also okay. But the key is that if leadership is pre-assigned and people know what their roles are, then that's a key that maybe there needs to be some rehearsals and some redefined roles for when a trauma comes. Your department needs more anesthesia staff to come in to help. Does your department have a system to rapidly reach additional anesthesiologists if more are needed? Yes, and you do have a formal call-in system. Informal, so you rely on text messaging or personal calls, whoever's in your phone. No clear system in place, or you're not sure if one exists. So knowing how to mobilize your team is probably one of the most high yield critical things that you can have during your Code Orange plan, because we all know delays in getting personnel into the hospital is going to create the bottleneck in the operating room and also in other areas of the hospital. So even having informal call system works, but having formal, robust, predefined alert system that everybody in your team knows how to use reduces confusion and ensures everyone knows who's coming in and when. And if you're not sure how additional staff are being reached in your hospital, then this is a great opportunity for you to clarify that for the rest of your department, so people know how they're going to be contacted and when people know that they're supposed to come to the hospital to help. Okay, so phase 3, chemical hazard unfolds. At 9:40, fire services identify the tanker truck was transporting an industrial solvent. Some of the first responders and patients are showing signs of chemical exposure, including respiratory distress, eye irritation, dizziness, and nausea.
All units be advised. We have confirmed a hazardous material release at the scene. The tanker is leaking an unknown chemical. White vapor and strong odor reported. Some first responders are showing signs of respiratory distress, nausea, and eye irritation. The hazmat team has been activated. Exposed patients en route to your hospital. ETA approximately 10 minutes.
So does your hospital have a written policy or clear chain of command for managing hazardous material incidents? Yes, and you, as a department, you've reviewed it in the last year. I think we have one, but I've never seen it, no idea, and we have trained hazmat responders internally. If that's your hospital, then I want to know what hospital you're at. So hazardous material incidents are high risk, time-sensitive situations, and having a written policy, or at least knowing that you have a written policy, keeps the response coordinated and safe. So even if we anesthesiologists were not leading the hazmat response, knowing the structure helps position yourselves and contributes to safety for the rest of the team. And if we're unsure of the policy, then that's a great cue for refresher and training drills. That way, we're not figuring these things out under pressure. So how should patient triage be adjusted in the setting of potential chemical exposure? Triage as usual in the emergency department, divert all incoming patients to another facility, set up an external decontamination zone before any hospital entry, and bring exposed patients directly to the OR for protection. So the answer could be very clear to many of us here, but if you don't have an external decontamination zone, then setting up or diverting patients to another facility might be the answer. Knowing the decontamination flow in your hospital helps you anticipate when and where you might need to manage airways resuscitation or prepare your OR safely when these patients come in. So phase number 4, infrastructure and systems begin to fail. So by 10:15, your ICU has reached full capacity. PACU is being now repurposed into a high acuity holding area. The blood bank is rationing O negative blood. Supply chains reports dwindling of anesthetic drugs, and the hospital communication network crashes due to system overload and faulty emergency backup. Tension grows between services about resource allocation.
Doctor, just so you're aware, ICU is officially at capacity. We've converted PACU into a high acuity holding area. Stable post-ops are being recovered right in the ORs. We're doing the best we can with limited staff. Supplies are running low across the board. We're short on basic anesthetic drugs, even Sux and Propofol. Some emergency meds are nearly gone. Blood banks now rationing products. Trauma gets first priority. No guarantee we'll have units for the next case. Comms are down. The overhead system is out, and paging is intermittent. We're relying on runners for critical messages.
Okay, so in your institution, what are the dedicated modes of backup communication? Cell phones, text, pagers, Teams, email, two-way radios, or overhead paging? Okay, so there's lots and lots of backup ways. So communication is one of the first things to go in a mass casualty incident, and knowing all methods of backup communication ensures that the whole system stays coordinated and people know how to get a hold of each other. So we know communication is going to get you your blood products, is going to get your OR assignments, request for staffing, equipment, and small delays can cascade into bigger problems. So if you're not familiar with your backup methods of communication, then that's a clear area for drills and orientation. And practicing these channels, knowing where to find these radios, knowing how to use these two-way radios is important, as it can save some critical minutes during a real emergency. So your PACU is full and your ICU is also full. Where are you going to recover post-op trauma patients? And we all know bed availability is one of the hardest challenges in a mass casualty incident. So having contingency plans for PACU and ICU overflow can prevent delays in patient care. So as anesthesiologists, we play a key role in deciding these kind of decisions. So where patients get transferred to, if they can safely be transferred to one area of the other, but also that highlights an importance of practicing, or at least knowing what areas in your department are areas that can be safely converted into these holding areas. And then next, how often does your department participate in hospital-wide disaster simulation or tabletop exercises? At least once a year, every 2 to 3 years, rarely, never, or unsure? Okay, so regular simulation having regular simulation exercises is one of the most effective ways to identify gaps before a real trauma hits. Even small exercises within your department, very simple: how to reach other people in your department, how to find the code orange file. Having a rehearsal every year can really make a difference in confidence and having a good plan and team for your department. So if the drills are infrequent or never, then that's a real clear opportunity. And consistent rehearsal builds confidence within your department. So finally, phase 5, recovery and reflection. By 3:30, the fire department has declared the scene safe. Patients continue to arrive for hours. Some are delayed due to rural triage and transport challenges. Your team has intubated 9 patients, managed 3 intra-op arrests, and recovered 2 pediatric trauma victims in the OR. 4 anesthesiologists were working nonstop with minimal food, hydration, and rest. Later that evening, the incident command team begins debriefing. Questions arise. Who has the authority to cancel elective cases? How do we care for our own teams during prolonged disasters? What changes must be made for next time, and what worked well and what failed? So after attending this session, how prepared do you feel to take part in developing a code orange for your department? So much more prepared, somewhat more prepared, neither more or less prepared, somewhat less, much less, or completely unprepared. I've learned nothing. Okay, somewhat more prepared and neither more or less prepared. So the goal of this isn't to have everybody leave as expert, but to at least spark awareness of rules, decision points, and some areas for improvement. As I said at the beginning, or maybe I didn't say that, this presentation might generate more questions than answers, and that's okay, because today we're just sharing a framework on how to improve things within your department if it's required. If some people feel neither more or less prepared, that's great, because there's a third part to this section where hopefully I can share some more tips on how to navigate this role of preparedness. So we've experienced what a code orange feels like, and we can see how quickly things can get out of hand. So the natural question is, how do we prepare our own department so we're not caught off guard? So in this last section, I'm going to present a stepwise approach to designing your Code Orange plan. So here is an anesthesia department's checklist on how to start developing your own Code Orange. I'll go over each step with you, but it's a start, and I'm also available at the end. But I know I'm dealing with a lot of experts here, so please, if there's anything that you think that needs refinement, I'm also happy to take some feedback as well. There's a QR code at the top of the screen that you can download and take back. And we'll start with the first step, which is identify a trauma anesthesiology lead. So this person is not going to be a name on the paper. They're going to be the architect, the trainer, and the advocate for your department's trauma readiness. Their first task is going to be to create a Code Orange plan, and that's going to cover staffing, activation, resource deployment, and communication. So the leader should identify a core team of people who will also know the plan inside out and are ready to be deployed when necessary. They should coordinate annual departmental simulations and ensure that they themselves are present and hospital-wide tabletop exercises. The leader should review the plan yearly, update it with staff turnover, new equipment, and hospital changes. And they should represent your department in the hospital with Code Orange discussions and simulations. Step number 2 is perform a hazard vulnerability analysis. So step number 2 is about tailoring your preparedness. Not every hospital is going to face the same risk. So a hazard vulnerability analysis helps you predict what kind of disasters are most likely to hit, and also to be prepared for those type of disasters. For example, if you're near a highway or an airport, then a mass casualty incident might be your biggest risk. If you're in an industrial area, then a chemical exposure can't be ignored. Same thing with wildfires, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, and other natural disasters. But what does that mean for us, anesthesia? It's going to help us look for our vulnerabilities. For example, do we have enough PPE and ventilators like we saw for airborne illnesses like we saw in COVID? Do we have enough PPE for a chemical or biological hazard? So for each of these hazards, we can tailor our trauma approach to suit the situation needs. So how can you perform a hazard vulnerability analysis? Here's an Excel tool that we've modeled and modified from the pre-existing ACS website, where you input the probability, the impact, and how prepared you currently are for a particular hazard. And that will show you where you need to dedicate some more time and attention for planning. Step number 3 is preparing a departmental Code Orange file. So this is essentially going to be your department's playbook in the heat of the moment. It should contain step-by-step activation instructions. So who's going to call who? How will your anesthesia team be mobilized? It should include a complete list of contacts. So who are the attendings, residents, CRNAs, assistants, support services? Whoever can be called in the moment should be in this file. Staff roles should be included, and we're going to talk about that later. And finally, make sure that this file is accessible. Keep a hard copy somewhere in your department where everybody knows where to find, and keep a digital copy on the internet that's easily accessible by the trauma leaders. Everyone should know how to use it, where it exists, and where to find it. Within our department, our physical department, we have a physical code orange file that's located in emergency code station box. So it's a literal code orange file that whoever is in the hospital that needs to use it can just open this, take it, and use what's required inside. Everyone in our department knows that it exists. It's literally in the entrance of the department. Step number 4 is define a communication structure. So in a disaster, confusion is the enemy. And step number 4 is making sure that communication is clear, fast, and reliable. So first, you're going to define a chain of command within your hospital. Who are going to be the major decision makers during the code orange? Who's going to be the first person to be notified during that code orange? Who will the hospital call? So do you know who that person is? Once that first person is called, do they know who to reach out to? Or is it just an ad hoc, whoever comes to mind first? Every member within the chain of command should know who they report to, and find out who your hospital chain of command is as well. This may be relevant, this may not be relevant for some places, but is there an area of your city that may become inaccessible during, let's say, a major road collision? Do you know where these people live in relation to that? Having a zoned area can be helpful in certain situations. So that can be something that works for your department. Next, define the notification process. So when a code orange is called, who's going to alert the people, and how will people be alerted during a code orange? Is it by your pager? Is it by text message? Is it by some type of internal chat system that your hospital uses, for example, Teams? How are you going to keep track of who's being contacted? And how will you contact the rest of the colleagues in your department, the CRNAs, the residents, the fellows, and other assistants that can help during the situation? So use redundant methods of communication. So in our department, not only do we use people's cell phone pager and home phone, like you saw in the previous slide, but we also use our Teams, which is our texting method within our department. If you're going to use text messages, make sure that they are being standardized. So this is a message that we copy paste from our code orange file into the chat, and use clear wording instead of vague texts. So for example, code orange situation, the coordinator will directly message you to come in and report to the OR command post. If you are not messaged, please do not come in or call back, and please reply to the chat with the 3 following information. If you are available, if you are not available, do not answer. How far in minutes are you? And do you have your employee ID on hand? Practice using your method of communication. Make sure that the first time a person sees this kind of text is not during a real emergency. And practice having people answer back to see if it works. Is it overwhelming your texting system? And step number 5 is define role and steps for leaders of your code orange. So step 5 is about role clarity. In a code orange, everyone's looking for direction. So having clear instructions on how to run the code orange avoids confusion. So roles should be assigned beforehand, and people should have clear instructions. So for example, we have an OR coordinator. This person is gonna manage everything that happens in the OR. They're gonna decide what surgeries continue and which get delayed. They're gonna assign how many people are required for each person. They're going to let the person that's deploying anesthesia staff know how many people are required to come back to the hospital. And their role is also to coordinate with other leaders. So those of the emergency department, PACU, the ICU, the nursing clinical care facilitators. They have predefined list of roles and tasks. We also have an emergency department coordinator. This person is going to stay in the emergency department, liaise with the ER coordinator. For example, let them know how many people need an operating room. And they're also going to help with any tasks required in the emergency department, such as airway. You can have a PACU and ICU coordinator. So someone who is overseeing all the areas that are being converted into ICU beds. You can have a resource officer. So someone whose sole role is to track equipment, monitors, and drugs. Whatever the roles are, it's best to have them predefined, written somewhere. We have these roles laminated, so they're in the code orange. So whoever's role is the emergency department coordinator has these in the moment. Obviously, these roles are rehearsed beforehand, but it's always great to have a cognitive aid when things are heated. And then finally, the last step is about joining hospital-wide discussions on Code Orange preparedness. So the last step is making sure that we as anesthesiologists aren't planning in a silo, because we know the Code Orange is never just an anesthesia problem. It's a hospital-wide issue. So we should be fully integrated into the hospital's disaster planning. That means that we should be sitting on all these meetings, all tabletop exercising, we should be involved. And we should also be advocating for our unique roles, our unique role in airway management and surge capacity. If we're not in the conversation, then we're being overlooked. And then finally, after any drill or any real event, we should be sharing our lessons with the rest of the department. That way we're building strong relationships with other departments like the emergency, the trauma surgeons, and the ICU. And that's just going to make us more effective and ready for a next time. So here again is the checklist on starting to develop your own Code Orange plan. Here are some resources that were used for planning this presentation, and I'll take any questions and answers or feedback or any experiences that you all have had too. It's all welcomed.
Thank you very much, Mary. You say it's emphasize the idea of practicing and simulation and everything. Now you are the trauma director, so obviously you're very well versed in all this. How often do people in your trauma anesthesia group go through all this in terms of preparing in simulation?
So I think that the key is what we do prepare is at least for staff deployment. I think that's the thing where people are the most caught up in, because once you get to the hospital, we all know how to manage traumas. We all know how to airways and all these things. But the key thing is resources and people, and having people follow the lead. And I think that's probably the hardest thing in a trauma, is when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, and just knowing how to reach your leader and knowing where to go and what to do. So the thing that we practice the most is at least sending out the text messages and making sure people know how to use their communication system. So like we said before, making sure that this text message is not the first time that you've seen this Code Orange and you don't know what to do and where to go. Knowing where the team can find the Code Orange plan, having people at least seen the roles and read them and know what those roles are. Having your department, let's say, review that once a year, I think is a great step for simulation. In terms of the tabletop exercises, those happen twice a year in our hospital. And myself and Jordan and the chief of our department are usually present. And anything that we've learned is then disseminated back to the department. So those are just starting steps. And then obviously, if you have a simulation department in an academic center that runs simulation, having the residents practice trauma drills, or staff, if that's possible too, is a lot harder for staff, I'm sure, but our trainees are good ways to start and having a staff who's interested in doing that, being present is also good.
Do you have anyone else come or be involved from the your anesthesia department? I'm thinking about administrators. Are those built in at all to the system?
So our administrators are actually the ones responsible for making sure that all contacts are updated on a yearly basis, and that they've made sure that I've reviewed the code orange on a yearly basis to make sure it's updated. Now within our hospital, we also have the Children's Hospital. There's also the Heart Institute, and they also ensure that those places are up to date for their code orange. So that's how they're built into that. Does that answer the question?
I was more thinking about like in the acute period in like the actual code
No,
orange. Is there any involvement for admin staff?
no administration for the acute event.
Jason, you had your hand up. I know you're very well versed in all this.
Yeah, we've had to utilize this several times over the years. Mary, great to see you, and thank you for providing this talk today. Yeah, I think you hit on some really relevant points here that I just want to come back to, and that is, when we developed our structure for our trauma response at WashU, we did a tiered response, and you're familiar with what that looks like. And we front-loaded people with more trauma expertise and seniority, into the earlier tiers. We did put administrative leaders in that early tier of notification as well. Not that we wanted them to come in and help manage personnel and messaging and so forth, but to be aware in the event that we turned into a tier 2 or tier 3 response where we expected a higher influx of patients, that we could pull them in at a moment's notice. We did give consideration to things like where people live geographically. A big one for us was, do you live on the Illinois side of the river or not? Are you going to have to cross the Poplar Street Bridge, which may not be a point of access depending on what kind of event we're talking about? And, putting people into tiers based on that at times. I would say, we also, you hit on an important point of having your ID with you. If you look back to the shooting in Vegas at the country music concert, a lot of the providers who were trying to get to their local hospital to respond had issues accessing their medical campus, because they failed to have their ID on them. We had a little bit of that too, if you look back at the Michael Brown shooting and when we had some of the demonstrations in St. Louis around that and people needed to access the medical campus. If you didn't have your ID on you, you weren't getting in. And so that's an important point of, we talk a little bit about having a go bag and having materials ready so that you could come into the hospital and be ready to stay for possibly a few days. Having your ID with you is an important element of that as well. And I think it's an important point to reinforce that, and just exposing everyone in your team to this Code Orange playbook. It's something that we used to do on an annual basis as part of our academy checklist of things that people went through, was sitting down and going through kind of a talk around how we implement our trauma alert and escalation plan. It's something that needs to be done with some regular frequency so that new members to the department, and even old that may have not done it for some period of time, know exactly what that looks like, because certain things may change from time to time. Your messaging strategy, what you use to message, right, Justin? I mean, we went through this where we were all set up on School Messenger. All of a sudden, the platform gets pulled from us without any warning. Now you have to pivot to a different messaging platform. So these are important things that if you're not practicing this with some routine, you're going to lose sight of those elements of your disaster plan.
Yeah, we just had a similar thing where they pulled out our messaging. So now we have to find a different way to reach our staff when that happens. And then the ID was from an incident that we had where, I'm available. And then you have no access to the hospital. Then you become a bit of a liability. Hey, can you come open the door? Well, I mean, people can't just leave their rooms to come open a door. So are you very useful during that moment? You are, but maybe it brings the fact that, you're going to prioritize someone who is available and who has their ID. So yes, those are all things that are important. And I was going to say at the beginning, I'm sure you were the one that had a perfect score on this, on the simulation, and you too, Justin, and everybody in your department, because you guys a lot of these things, like you learn from experience, and you guys have figured out a lot of these things too. So,
But I think that Jason's point about the communication, I mean, that we are still finding a replacement for School Messenger.
yeah, we're still working on it
Yeah,
too.
but
Yeah,
it's been years,
well,
you
then, and
know.
then that reverts to having a backup method. So then maybe you're gonna have to do the old school phoning and paging, and very tedious. And you'd be surprised how many people you need just for calling people out. Like, you might need two people whose sole responsibility is just, hey, we need more people. Okay, who are you gonna call next? Who did we
Well,
call? Who's
and that's where I brought up the administrative help, because that came up. I don't know. I think it was doing one of the reviews with the American College of Surgeons. I think it came up, but someone mentioned, "Do we have any admin help?" And it for that exact situation of making the phone calls. And I know there's some other people on from other hospitals. I'm wondering if they're still. Yeah, I see Ron and Jamie Sparling. I don't know if they want to talk about their response at all, or if they have something different or anything to add when it comes to that. But I think to your point, yeah, it's a lot of work just to coordinate. And one of the other thoughts was, who's going to plan schedules after the initial event? So let's say you're going to be running the ORs for more than 12 hours. Who's going to set up the relief system? And how are we going to put that together? And is it really something we want to put on the person who's trying to triage everything on the front lines? Or should we think about having some backup of some kind? No, you mentioned the perfect score. I think talks like this just, I would say Jason and I probably see more holes in our system than anything else, because you've either walked through simulations and you understand how things actually work when put to a test, and you understand how many things can break down. I was laughing at the communication thing because we still keep a fax machine in that our control room that we dust off on occasion, that I hope still works, but that has always been told to me as our backup communication system. And so something we have to keep there solely for that reason, so that we have extra lines of communication if all else breaks down. I don't know what the fax number is, but there again would be one of the holes.
I
It's
did have
Ron
one
Senate.
question. So you can go.
Sure. Ron, you came on.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Great talk. Thank you so much. And I can tell you at Shock Trauma, as much as we seem to the rest of the world to know exactly what we're doing in some of these kind of scenarios, we're going to struggle as well. I think one of the big issues for us, and I'm curious what the rest of the group has to share, but one of the big things for us is that a lot of it's always driven by trauma surgery and trauma nursing and whatnot, and anesthesia services is they're generally supportive in these kind of situations, even though we should probably take a more direct and prominent role. I just wonder whether or not you always have simulation together with other disciplines, or do you have your own simulation? Is there any value to having an anesthesia simulation for this without the other disciplines? And if you did do that, what would it even look like? Because we ran a couple sims, but most of our sims are either in the sim center or more. We did a sim actually in our trauma resuscitation unit. We simulated as though 20 patients came in. We had surgeons, anesthesiologists, nursing, various different staff. It went very well. But in order to coordinate that, obviously it's significant, and you're not going to do it that often. I just wonder if you can run any kind of mini sim for your own anesthesia department and what that would look like.
Mary, is there anything, or Jason?
I'll let Jason answer first.
I would just say, Ron, I think there's value in both, right? There's value in the internal mini sim just at the department level to flush out, little kinks in your own departmental response. There's a ton of value into the larger multidisciplinary response. And Yeah, I would say that's an area where we as a trauma center have failed to really do enough of that historically. I mean, the last really large tabletop exercise I remember us doing was probably 2017. It was a winter weather operation, that was all based around a multi-vehicle accident. And we took it to full scale where we, opened our incident command center in the mid-campus center portion of our building. We had periop leaders, we had the faculty practice plan involved. And we really walked through every element of how we would respond to this. We did it on a weekend, so it didn't, cause any kind of significant disruption to the normal operations that were going on a weekend schedule. But that's where you flush out some real problems, right? Like I remember as we were talking about patients getting triaged in the ED, you identified you needed more spine surgery resources. So who's going to be the one to solve to that problem? Well, the faculty practice plan wanted to be the one that would make the call to leadership of either orthopedics or neurosurgery to tell them, hey, we need another spine surgeon. That's probably not something that was intuitive to the rest of us prior to doing a big exercise like that. You really do kind of figure out, oh, we've got problems where we don't have enough two-way radios for all the right people to carry so that we can have ease of communication between the key clinical operational leaders. So I think there's a ton of value in doing both. The problem you usually get is the pushback on doing these larger scale multidisciplinary exercises is that people don't have the time. It's going to be disruptive to your normal operations. So you have to make the time, you have to find the time. And sometimes that's going to be on a weekend and bringing people in on their day off to do it. But it's worth it, in my opinion.
Thanks.
Sorry. Any other questions? Anyone else have any comments?
I have a question just about what kind of software you use to kind of create that simulation. I thought that was really neat.
It was actually Jordan Zunder who's supposed to join the presentation. I am not a tech expert in any way, but I can ask him. I don't think he's on the call right now, but he did use some software. He showed it to me. I could definitely get back to you on that, but he did a great job.
Yeah,
And
I'd love to see what he used.
the slide, like the Slido, I think that's pretty clear, right? You're just talking more about the person that was, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But the
Aaron
like the
Shimon.
EMS dispatcher talking and stuff. Yeah.
He was unfortunately on call and he was going to do the simulation part because he did such a good job creating it, but he wasn't able to get out on time, so
Thank you.
no problem.
Yeah, that was I like the modern approach to a presentation like this. It was really useful to kind of walk through and make you think about things. Well, we are at time, so if there are no other follow-up questions, I just want to say thank you again, Mary. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for participating and offering your expertise here. And to everyone, Aaron will send out the email for the next invite for next month relatively soon. And so thank you all. I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
Mary.